Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Chris Hogg, Nestlé's Global Head of Public Affairs. Today, we're sharing our strategic direction on creating shared value towards 2030. Creating shared value as a concept is based on Nestlé's strong conviction that a company should create value both for the shareholders and for society at large. Over the next hour, we plan to set out our strategic approach to achieve this, focusing on nutrition and on sustainability, looking at our impact both on the environment and on communities. I'm joined today by David Rennie, Head of Strategic Business Units Marketing and Sales, Stefan Palzer, Chief Technology Officer and Head of R&D, and Antonia Wanner, Chief Sustainability Officer. In a moment, David will share the overview of our Creating Shared Value approach, and then he, Stefan, and Antonia will discuss in more detail how this agenda supports Nestlé's growth, strengthens the company's resilience, and benefits the people who buy our products, their families, and pets. We'll then open up for Q&A, and here's how you can send in your questions. Click the Q&A icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, type your question, and click Send. Please include your name and the organization that you're from. And with that, I'll hand over to David.
Thank you, Chris, and good afternoon, everyone. Creating shared value is how we do business. Providing support for families, people, and their pets has been and will always be at the very centre of what we do. We strive to make a positive impact on the communities and the environment where our ingredients come from and beyond, while at the same time strengthening our business. Creating shared value is at the very centre of Nestlé's virtuous circle, the strategic framework that guides decision-making across the company. The Nestlé virtuous circle promotes efficiency and increases productivity. That unlocks resources for investments to fuel innovation and sustainable growth. Creating shared value isn't about choosing between profit and purpose, it's about how we achieve both. When done well, this can translate into stronger consumer engagement with our brands. For example, in France, our Smarties brand switched to recyclable paper packaging and responsibly sourced cocoa through the Nescafé Cocoa Plan and increased sales. In Mexico, we've been able to integrate the work we've done on regenerative agriculture into the brand proposition for Nescafé, helping build brand equity. What we refer to as a regeneration wheel reflects the holistic approach that today guides our efforts. The lessons we've learned over the past years have shaped our path forward, and you can see on the right some of our achievements so far. These efforts have helped us to understand what works best, what we can scale, and where we need to accelerate or adapt. The purpose of this approach that you see set out on these slides is to make us a stronger, more resilient business. By staying closely connected to communities where we operate, we want to be a trusted partner and a good neighbour, ultimately benefiting both Nestlé and the communities with which we engage. So let me turn now to how we plan to deliver each of these priorities and how we track progress and what actions we're taking. The Nestlé portfolio of brands, from food and beverage to medical nutrition to pet care, reflects deliberate choices we have made aligned with our purpose: to unlock the power of food to enhance the quality of life for everyone, today and for generations to come. Nutrition continues to be a key pillar of our strategy, and our approach continues to evolve to match shifts in consumer expectations. From food safety to nutrition and health research, our scientists are continually pushing the boundaries of nutritional science and dietary research. To that end, our nutrition strategy focuses on strengthening our core portfolio of brands, future-proofing our offerings, and championing guidance for tasty and balanced diets. We aspire to lead in responsible consumer communication and education on nutrition. And as part of this, we're expanding our affordable nutrition range and leveraging science and technology to enhance the nutritional value of our products through smart innovation and reformulation. We use familiar and trusted ingredients. For example, in Central and West Africa, where Maggi has launched bouillon cubes made with local ingredients like stock fish, onions, and chili, bringing the authentic flavors from the kitchen cupboard to everyday cooking. We believe that every category, including indulgent foods and beverages consumed responsibly, can have a place in the diet. And we're offering more balanced choices to help people who are trying to eat less of some nutrients like sodium or sugar, or more of other key nutrients like protein or fiber. We're also developing tailored nutrition solutions to meet specific dietary needs for people throughout their lives, like supporting women's health, healthy longevity, and personalized nutrition addressing specific medical needs. Our aim is to advance regenerative food systems at scale, making regenerative agricultural practices the standard in the food industry, addressing environmental and social aspects holistically. Regenerative agriculture helps restore ecosystems, improve the resilience to climate change, and support livelihoods. It includes practices like enhancing biodiversity, conserving soil, regenerating water cycles, and integrating livestock. The way our ingredients are used can also create real tangible benefits, improved yields, and improved livelihoods for the farmers and for farming communities. We're already seeing positive results from the implementation of regenerative farming practices, supporting climate resilience and biodiversity. By the end of the decade, we aim to have sourced at least half of our key ingredients from farmers adopting regenerative agricultural practices. I also today want to reaffirm Nestlé's ambition to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by half by 2030, and our plan is well on track to deliver. However, we need policymakers to create the enabling conditions for this to happen at scale across the entire food and agricultural industry and beyond. It's important too that we play our part in advancing circularity. Frankly, we were disappointed that the efforts to agree a UN plastics treaty in recent weeks have not achieved success. We urgently need harmonised regulation to support the development of effective recycling systems. Our 2030 packaging sustainability strategy, which you will see published next year, reconfirms our determination to support the transition to a circular economy. Our vision is clear, that no packaging ends up in landfill or as litter. Finally, supporting the people who work for us and with us and their communities is core to our Creating Shared Value strategy. As part of our ambition to help closing the living income gap for cocoa farmers and their families and supporting livelihoods, we've expanded our Income Accelerator programme for cocoa in the Ivory Coast and in Ghana, and it's already delivering deliverable and measurable impact, improving yields, the well-being of the communities, and ultimately the incomes for the farming families. We will continue our efforts to address child labour, working closely with our direct suppliers to ensure adequate human rights and environmental due diligence systems are in place. Looking ahead, we're focused on supporting people to build the skills and capabilities they will need to thrive in the emerging economies. And we'll continue to work with farmers' organisations and others to empower more young people to become agripreneurs, building on the strong foundations of our Nestlé Needs Youth programme, which is 10 years old this year. So to conclude, we thrive when the ecosystems we are part of are strengthened. To play our part requires a deep understanding of the environment in which we operate and the active contributions to the resilience of the entire ecosystem. When people within our value chain, employees, stakeholders, retailers, consumers, and the suppliers thrive, so do we. The challenges are much bigger than any one company can solve. So we collaborate with others because transforming food systems at scale takes collective action, bold partnerships, shared ambition, and long-term commitment. We're really grateful to all of our partners, many of whom have joined us on this call today, for helping us bring these ambitions to life. If you're watching and you're interested in joining us and contributing to our efforts, we would love to hear from you. And with that, now let me hand back to Chris for the next part of the webinar.
Thank you very much, David. So now let's explore some of this in more detail. A reminder that if you have a question, type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And please remember to add your name and organization. So let's start with a question for Stefan. Stefan, R&D is key as we seek to evolve our product portfolio. And we did just hear David talking about strengthening our portfolio of brands. So what's going to be the R&D contribution to that?
Absolute valid question, Chris. I do believe there's no doubt that to achieve health or to promote health through nutrition, the way to go is a balanced diet. Reality is that many consumers, they're confused what's a balanced diet. Well, people search their wisdom on social media, and we know not everything which is promoted there is really rooted in sound science. So there's an element to educate consumers, and yes, as a company, we can play a limited role in this space, but where we can really help is through our portfolio. Because the reality is that many consumers, even if they know what's healthy, what's balanced, they struggle to live it daily for cost reasons, accessibility reasons, or be it because of preferences, sensorial preferences. So our role is to help through our portfolio consumers to get closer to the ideal balanced diet. So how do we do that? On one hand, we need, and we are doing that already to some extent today, but we will further accelerate, offer choices, more balanced choices, so that consumers can choose between a traditional SKU and an SKU which is either reduced in health-sensitive nutrients or increased in health-promoting nutrients, like, for instance, fibers, protein, and micronutrients. Then the second initiative, and that's also consuming quite a lot of R&D resources, is the ongoing reformulation of our mainstream portfolio. So we are continuously trying to search ways how we can reduce health-sensitive nutrients, increase health-promoting nutrients, while still not losing our consumers. Because it doesn't help if you have a very healthy product, it doesn't taste good and nobody's buying it. We all agree. Third axis of activity is linked a bit to eliminating food additives, so going to a kitchen cupboard ingredient list. And I'm very proud what we achieved, for instance, in the area of artificial colors. So we have cleaned nearly our entire portfolio from artificial colors. So we're talking about 99.8% of the portfolio which is free of artificial colors. So we have only a handful of SKUs which are left, a handful of products which are left, and also those we will now reformulate in the coming 12 months.
And kitchen cupboard means?
Kitchen cupboard means ingredients consumers are used to, which you would find also in many kitchens at homes. That's why I've searched the term. So more familiar ingredients, which are often also more natural. So that's what we mean by kitchen cupboard. Then we also do a lot of work when it comes to portion guidance and portion size, and that's especially relevant for our indulgent categories. So we need to guide consumers clearly what's the adequate portion size, and then also reduce packagings, for instance, make packagings reclosable, and so on. Last but not least, our company has also the ambition to offer proper nutrition for all stages of life. So there is a bit personalization also, which is relevant here, and for also all health conditions. We often forget that. And all stages of life means we start already with products which are in the prenatal, for the prenatal phase. So for pregnant women which are expecting a baby. And nutrition of those mothers is very important to ensure that the baby after birth is in the best possible state when it comes to health. And then it stretches all the way until a high age. So nutrition for healthy longevity. But we are also catering for those which are suffering from disease. People often forget Nestlé has also medical nutrition portfolio. So we have products, for instance, for oncology. People really suffering from terrible diseases, and also here you need to have proper nutrition. So that's a bit what we do in terms of portfolio.
So David also talked about our scientists operating at the frontier of nutrition research. So
Yeah.
when we're looking ahead to 2030, what are the areas, the newer areas that we're working in?
Yeah, of course, we always base our interventions, our reformulations on science. So we are really studying the scientific literature. We conclude what's the latest science, and science is evolving. You see that the science around carbohydrates and fats, if you look at that, the last 2 decades, there was a period where we said all fat is bad, and there was a period where all carbohydrates were banned. So science is evolving, but we always stay at the forefront. Now, what you see, that there are also new opportunities when it comes, for instance, to early life nutrition. What's very new that already nutrition in the preconception phase is impacting the health of the baby and nutrition of the father and the mother, by the way, not only the mother, both. Then the nutrition for proper aging, for healthy longevity. That's also evolving quite fast. And then an area which is also increasingly gaining traction is rapid weight loss. The weight loss drugs. And here what's very interesting, what people often overlook, well, if you go on such a rapid weight loss program, you lose a lot of muscle mass. And you potentially develop deficiencies of micronutrients. And here we can help as well. So these are some of the areas which we are studying currently quite intensively.
Now, David, I want to turn to you and ask you in a moment about affordable nutrition, but we've obviously had some questions from stakeholders about the leadership change announced this week, specifically when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to sustainability, to this agenda. Does anything change?
The short answer, Chris, is no. I think you've seen from the company statements that we've made this week that our overall strategy is going to remain broadly the same, and certainly as it relates to sustainability and CSV, we are very committed. Our new CEO, Philip Navratil, has been a member of the executive board. He's been a member of our CSV council. He is very, very familiar with all of these topics and a big supporter of our CSV agenda. So we should expect all of our commitments to continue to be in place.
And we are seeing questions starting to come in, so thank you very much for those. We'll come to those in a moment, but the other question we've had from Share Action, which works with a coalition of investors in the UK, Nestlé announced in May that we were going to evolve our nutrition reporting and move closer to build on top of what we already do, move closer to the scope of the Access to Nutrition Index. And they were raising the question, is that pledge still valid?
Again, Chris, the short answer is yes. That pledge is very much still active. We made the commitment in May, no change to that commitment. And you will see in our non-financial reporting in February the changes that we propose.
Great, thank you for clearing that up. On affordable nutrition, whether you're in a developing country or a developed country, the cost of living crisis is a big issue for you and your family. Yeah. So where do you see Nestlé's role in trying to address that and help to address that?
Well, Chris, I think you said it well. Whether you're in Western Europe or West Africa, the cost of feeding your family right now is expensive. We have been committed to providing affordable nutrition for decades. It's in our very DNA. Not just affordable nutrition, but fortified solutions. Fortifying the nutrition that we make available for people who are deficient in micro, but also macronutrients. People are deficient in fiber. in many parts of the world, deficient in protein in many parts of the world, as well as some of the micronutrients. So our commitment continues to be absolutely key here, and we continue to develop our programs. So a couple of things to give you an illustration of that. In 2024 alone, we delivered more than 130 billion servings of micronutrients. That's a massive contribution to the health and well-being of many people across the world. And we're not only going to continue to expand what we do on affordable nutrients and fortification, we're also developing new products that allow people to get alternative sources to protein that are more affordable and more readily available, like our Maggi soya chunks and our meat extenders, to allow consumers all over the world to get access to really high quality protein at much more affordable prices.
Okay, I want to move to sustainability. So Antonia, our Chief Sustainability Officer, we've had a net zero roadmap since 2020, and at the same time we're also putting a lot of emphasis on regenerative agricultural practices. Can you explain a little bit about how one contributes to the other?
Yes. So first of all, we've been working directly with farmers since we exist. The latest numbers I've seen, it's 500,000 farmers we work directly with. Now, we then had first evidence that regenerative agriculture practices, they help to reduce the greenhouse gas footprint. So we integrated these practices into the training of the farmers, and also we started measuring. When we did that, we found that the farms are also more resilient against extreme weather events. So in periods of droughts or stark rain, we could see that, for example, the water retention in the soil was better when the soil was not tilled. Or we've seen that where we had shade trees for coffee and cocoa, also here the heat resistance of the plants were better. So overall, we saw more stable yields, which then made the farms more resilient, which helped the supply, but it also helped the income of the farmers. So that's why, with this incredible benefit we've seen from applying the regenerative agriculture practices, that's why we want to put more focus on it.
The questions have started to come in, and there's one on this subject from Seth Petchers from the Sustainable Food Lab. So thank you, Seth, for your question. Seth says, for Nestlé to meet its carbon and regenerative agriculture goals, you'll need farmers to change the way they grow.
Yes.
And that requires them to invest. So our past CEO has spoken about the importance of what people call the just transition.
Exactly.
To reduce carbon by investing in the farmers, helping the farmers to invest, investing in their farms to help the process. So his question is, can you talk a bit more about how this plays into the design of the programs and the approach we take?
Yeah, but both go together. I mean, we do not reduce our greenhouse gas emissions only through regenerative agricultural practices. There's more. I mean, we also do work in our factories, for example, or for logistics, but the majority indeed comes from the ingredients. Now, there is one important aspect, and you were mentioning the farmers, and they need to do so, change the practices to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. If we did, or let me put it like this, where we had approached the farmers and said, please, you need now to do this and that different to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, the motivation was not, let's say, very high. Why? Because a farm is a business, and the farmer, of course, needs to have a successful business to keep running the farm. So when then we found out, coming back to my earlier point, that we had more stable yields, which increased the income of the farmer, and the farmer could see, through applying these practices, I'm actually having a better business. That was a fantastic motivation. And then when a few farms started, the neighbors saw it, that actually things are better with this farm, better resilience, then we had a snowball effect. Yeah, so I think really understanding what is in it for the farmer, and combining what we do with that, building our plan on this was actually the major accelerator.
So Stefan, sticking with Regen Ag, we've got a question here from Fran Proschia from EIT Food Public Affairs in Brussels. She says, how does regenerative agriculture fit into agri-food biotechnology developments? And how does that fit into Nestlé's strategy?
Look, to get to regenerative agriculture, you need also technology. It's a misconception just to reduce interventions on the field that will lead to the desired result, because you will challenge the harvest, and potentially also the quality of the crops will go down. So we need somehow technology. Now, if you look, for instance, at fertilizer, today, still to a large extent, fertilizer is synthesized. Could we in the future work with biofertilizers? Then crop protection. Could we use biological ways to protect our crops? So there's ample applications of technology in the frame of regenerative agriculture to reduce here the burden on the environment. In the meantime, protecting the quality and the quantity of the crop.
So, Antonio, I want to turn to circularity, because this again is an agenda that we have been working on for some time. The focus moving towards 2030, more of a shift towards the support for voluntary waste management. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yes, we have learned over the past years that we need a more tailored approach. We still have the two pillars of our strategy, which is better packaging, so make packaging recyclable, reduce the virgin plastics, and the better systems. Now, what we've seen, it was no surprise that this is the case, but let's say the extent was somewhat not expected, the extent to which waste management, effective waste management did not exist or did not evolve. So we've seen then we need to have a different approach in countries where there is no waste management or just punctual waste management. We need to support this. So to have good waste collection, waste sorting, and ideally recycling as well, to have that in place and focus on this. And that's then only after that comes actually further change in the packaging. Whereas when there's good waste management in place, this is where we can keep improving our packaging so that the maximum can be recycled. And the last very point is what we want to do everywhere is to advocate for good EPR schemes, for regulation that helps to accelerate the journey towards better packaging and better systems.
And within that, connected to that, there is a question which I'll start with Antonio and then come to you, Stefan, to hear your views, because it's a question that we have been discussing over the last few weeks, which is about food waste. And it's a question that's come in from Shan Young from CL Environmental. An often missed opportunity is the connection between food security, nutrition, and food loss and waste.
Yes.
Has Nestlé looked at this area or is Nestlé looking at this area to reduce food loss and waste? And are we willing to partner with local organizations to support the efforts?
Yes. So the short answer is yes. So, and here definitely we would want to continue and even expand the partnering with local organizations. This is very effective. What we will do in addition is now to go into a deeper analysis. Where is the majority of the food waste happening? Where do we have the maximum control? So where can we be most effective? And this is then where we want to focus and we will certainly come back over the next month with a bit more detail on that.
But it is a complicated topic.
It is. If we talk about food waste, we have, of course, the waste appearing on the farms, on the fields. We have the waste appearing in our operations and the waste appearing on the consumer side. When it comes to interventions on the farm, we are doing a lot here by educating farmers, working together with farmers. We even developed now, and we published that recently, a new technology to valorize the cocoa pod even much more. So in the past, we were taking only the cocoa beans and transforming them into a chocolate. Now we want also to take the fruit pulp of the cocoa and transform them into a chocolate. That means, of course, you have less waste appearing on the field, on the farm. Same then in our operations. a great example is our Nescafé. Our passion is to bring the maximum of the bean into the cup. And I think we are the most efficient in the world to do that. So it's really a large amount of the bean going into the cup, much more than in any full automat or any filter coffee at home. So meaning we have much less waste. And the bit spent grounds, which is left then after brewing the coffee, we use to generate steam. We incinerate it in our factories. So having said that, that means in a factory, you have the water and the beans, the green beans going in, and the Nescafé leaving the factory. That's it. And then on the consumer side, that's still a topic where Antonio was alluding to, where we still need to do some work. From R&D side, of course, we ensure that our product have a good shelf life. Because if the product is more stable and is not spoiling during the shelf life, that means less waste. So we can help consumers via that. We can help consumers by reclosable packaging. So there's also some R&D work which can help consumers also to reduce on their side the waste.
Thank you. So Shan actually has a second question, which I can put to you, David, because you talked about communities and people are inherently central to the just transition. Yep. And Shan is asking the Income Accelerator program, who does it target?
Well, the Income Accelerator program is a program for cocoa farmers in West Africa. So 70% of all of the world's cocoa comes from two countries, Ghana and the Côte d'Ivoire. And both of those countries have some real challenges for cocoa farmers because cocoa farming by its nature is small plots, typically very old cocoa trees, and they're very difficult to manage and harvest and get good yield from. So we're in those communities on the ground. We have hundreds of agronomists on the ground, and that's who we're targeting. We want to build resilience into what is a very hard livelihood, which is cocoa farming. And we've done that through a variety of different interventions, but in a way the most important is, can we get better yield from those trees, from those farmers? And the really encouraging thing, Chris, is that we know, we have proven that by following our Income Accelerator program, farmers can get up to 18% more yield from their crops. And that's just the beginning. So making these interventions does the most important thing for long-term survival for farmers, which is improving their ability to get yield. And that's why we're really keen, and we will be expanding that program now to many more farmers and build it out because it's proven to have the impact we need. More yield, more income, more sustainable farming, and more sustainable farming communities.
So lots of interesting questions coming in, and I think this one's probably best for you, Stefan, because it's about alternative proteins. Mm-hmm. So this is from Diplav Sapkota. So Diplav, thank you for your question, who's ex-Sun Network. How does Nestlé envision improving the nutrient profile of alternative proteins mm-hmm. while also reducing the cost?
Yeah, look, on one hand, the nutrient profile of alternative proteins is not per se bad. Huh? Typically, we judge the quality of a protein by the amino acid composition. Huh? And the target is always to have something which is comparable, for instance, to dairy protein. Huh? So if you take plant proteins and you blend them in the right way, you get to the same quality like, for instance, a dairy protein. Huh? So that's very important. Now, the question which is very valid, the second part of the question, how to make then also those alternative proteins more affordable. Because the reality is that many of them, if you take, for instance, an alternative protein created by precision fermentation or some of the plant proteins, pea protein, for instance, they're very expensive. Huh? So we do a lot of work now on local sourcing. That's already the start, because if you can source the crop locally, well, it's often much more affordable than to import it and ship some of the crops around the world. That's the first angle. A second angle, we also now starting to blend animal and plant proteins. Because if we go, for instance, pure with plant proteins, often you're losing consumers because of taste, to some extent also because of nutrition. So we are working now more with blends of animal and plant proteins, and that works wonderful. On one hand, you get something which is nutritionally very high in quality, but which is also tasting very good and which is very affordable. So that's for us a new area of innovation, to bring those blends now in many of our categories to many of our brands and many of our geographies.
And Diplaf, David, her second question is really about the market and how we see that alternative protein market going. Diplaf says this market has been plateauing. So does Nestlé see an upward trajectory for this sector?
Well, I think, as Stefan said, one of the ways to really unlock the potential of this is to move to local sourcing. I mean, it does not make a lot of sense to take plant-based proteins from one part of the world to the other part of the world to try and create value for consumers or for business. So our focus on finding local sources of alternative protein, local ways of processing that and getting that into the products that people love in their locality, I think is going to be a game changer for making that more accessible and more affordable.
Great. Thank you very much for all the questions that are coming in. A reminder that if you want to ask a question, you just fill it in the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom, at the bottom of your Zoom window, and that you can, of course, if you put your name and your organization, that helps us too. So, Antonia, 2 or 3 questions here about regenerative agriculture. One of them is about data. Mm-hmm. So this is from Asger Bosselman from the University of Copenhagen, who says, as a researcher, he's obviously interested in data. He's asking about the kind of data collection that we are implementing from when we're working with farmers who are going from conventional to regenerative agricultural practices. So how are we collecting, and what kind of data are we collecting? And is this going to be available for research collaboratively between Nestlé and researchers such as Asger?
So we do indeed collect the data on the farm. So it's not that we make it up or do some extra bits. We do collect the data. We have a tool for this, and it's data of the soil. So all kind of measurements of the soil. So this is probably then something for a follow-up discussion with the one who asked the question. So soil, which includes water, soil organic matter, etc. Then we also measure biodiversity, which is part of the soil as well, but also in the surroundings. And yes, we do measure the greenhouse gas as well. Of course, greenhouse gas sequestration, greenhouse gas emissions. So there's a variety of measurements. Not everything is relevant everywhere. This again depends on the respective geographies, but and the crops, of course. But yeah, I think what I would suggest to reconnect afterwards, together with our experts in that field, and then see where we can take it from there.
So Asger will make sure that we do that with you, Stefan.
And maybe if I may add to what Antonia said. First of all, we have to acknowledge we are not so long on a regenerative agricultural journey, even as a global community. So you need to go through a number of vegetation periods to conclude. Yeah. And then secondly, of course, what we still do, our scientists do, they publish the data anyhow. And then if there's interest in specific areas, of course, we can always discuss that on a bilateral level with the university. But in principle, we publish also our research.
And a follow-up from Norbert from Fair Farms, and this is the topic that comes up in almost every meeting. How are we going to leverage AI to support farmers?
Look, AI is a topic which will transform everything which we do. It's cutting across the company. And of course, it's also touching our agricultural activities. So think of it today, we are applying fertilizer on large areas, and actually often we don't know what is actually needed in a specific part of the field or in a specific region. So AI can help us, for instance, combined with satellite data or drone data, and then also sampling on the ground to apply, for instance, fertilizer much more targeted. Same, of course, for any crop protection intervention. Today, farmers are spraying pesticides over their entire fields. Is it not more efficient to use AI to analyze data of the ground, to identify where the weed is located, and then to do very functional intervention there, and to apply the pesticide only on this small area? Then AI, of course, we are also leveraging, for instance, in plant breeding. We do still traditional breeding, so we have a large collection of coffee varieties, cocoa varieties, and the question is always, and it's traditional breeding, what are the best progenies? What are the best parents to create certain traits in certain properties in a new variety? And so we did a genetic analysis of all the varieties we have in the collection, and then you still need AI to make some sense out of that, because it's not so trivial. So AI helps you to predict what are the two parents you need to cross over to get to a highly performant, disease-resistant, drought-resistant new coffee or cocoa variety.
I would like to add one element which I forgot to mention. We also measure the yield. Yeah, because we have been mentioning several times that we have observed the increase of yield. I mean, this is something we measure as well. And when then our regenerative agriculture program is combined with things like income accelerator, which are more under the umbrella of responsible sourcing, we also, of course, measure the income of the farmer. So it's the totality, it's the impact on the planet, but also nature, and also for the people.
And maybe, sorry, Chris, I had one ad just to build on this discussion, which is our ability through AI and blockchain to take from individual farmers and right down to the individual bush that a cocoa pod came from, ultimately, all the way through the supply chain, gives us the real opportunity to connect our suppliers all the way with our end consumers. So truly live this mantra of from bean to cup and be able to track produce all the way through the supply chain, which allows for quality. It allows for really connecting consumers with suppliers in a meaningful way that can add value to both. And it also allows us to make the right interventions in terms of regenerative agricultural practices, so we can track how the bean is and what it looks like, and also critically reward the farmers who are implementing these practices with our premiums. So the ability to truly connect on an individual basis, the AI and blockchain is allowing us, will transform, and allow us to transform the industry.
We have a lot of questions coming in, and bear with me if I don't get to yours as quickly as you might like, but we've got a lot to choose from. In a moment, David, I'm going to come to you with a question about human rights and our commitments to human rights beyond child labor. But Antonia, there's a question here, which is from Anna Bexel from ProForest, who again would like to really understand how Nestlé supports the farmers in this transition to regenerative agriculture, because as she points out, it's often the farmers that carry the risks. So obviously we have the Nescafé plan, we have the Nestlé Cocoa plan, the Nestlé Dairy plan. What are we actually doing to support those farmers?
Yeah, so practically most important, and the word risk was mentioned, we want to de-risk the farm. So what is the worst thing for a farmer? You start working with the farmer, and then let's say next year you say, okay, now I'm walking away. This is not what we do. So it's a multi-year program. We give training. We also support financially the just transition. You mentioned this earlier. That is the second one, and yeah, and we give also stability in terms of we buy then what is produced.
And an interesting question from Christina Sen-Jakobsen from the Swiss Food and Nutrition Valley that pointing out that 72% of shopping decisions are made in store. So how do we work with the retailers as Chief Sustainability Officer when you're meeting the customers, the Walmart, the Carrefour? What are we doing with retailers to make healthier and more sustainable and easy choice for consumers?
There are three areas. So the first one is, I would say, that is more David's expertise, the classic marketing. Embed sustainability into the brand communication and make it part of the shopper experience. Now, there are ways how to do it and how not to do it. I would not go into details here, but certainly we see some success if this is done well, it actually works. And then that helps the retailer because they sell more and it helps us as well. So that's the marketing side. Then there's actually the work on the ground. So doing projects together. Like I was recently with one of our customers on a logistics project. Yeah? So we then combine the tours in a way that the trucks are always fully loaded. It sounds very simple, but it requires quite some effort to do this. So that's one. But then also we have regenerative agriculture. We do projects together with some of our customers. So that's really this work on the ground. Packaging is another one, like when you think about e-commerce, what type of packaging, etc. But then there's another one, and this has come up in the recent developments on in regulation. So our customers, same as us, need to report quite a number of data. And actually there's increasing interest in us, as we're their suppliers, providing accurate data on the greenhouse gas emission, on the greenhouse gas reduction, which again helps their targets as well. So because we're their scope 3, they need to decarbonize or reduce their emissions. And then through that angle of our work on the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, we help them to reduce their footprint as well. So that's actually a third one, which is increasingly of interest.
So David, Louise Herring from AIM Progress has asked, can you explain a bit more about, more broadly, beyond the work that we do on child labour, our human rights work?
Well, when you think about human rights beyond child labour, I sort of think about two things. The fundamental right to have a living income and our responsibility to ensure due diligence in every single aspect of what are inherently very complex supply chains. So we've talked a lot about living income. I think living income is a sort of fundamental human right. And that's why the programs that we have in place on cocoa and on coffee are really beginning to make an impact and show the way of how you can make these farmers' livelihoods much more sustainable. So I gave you a bit of an insight into what's happening on the cocoa plan. Let me sort of dig in just maybe a little bit more detail to give you a bit more flavour of what that is. You know, one of the questions that we often get is, you know, cocoa prices are extraordinarily high at the moment, so are farmers getting their share of that? And I think it's important that we recognise that the farm gate price of cocoa in Côte d'Ivoire and Ivory Coast is set by government. And then on top of that, it's traded. So by us going directly to farmers, we can't affect the farm gate price. It's not ours to set, and we can't affect the global price. But what we can do is make sure that the farmers that we work with in the accelerator programs get the full benefit of our expertise and our know-how and how they can improve their yield through adopting the best practice. And importantly, we pay, and we pay a premium for every farmer who is involved in that program, regardless of the volume that they give us. You think about it, that means that even the smallest smallholder is going to get real benefit from that program because it's not volume weighted, it's a premium that we guarantee if you take part in the program. So the yield goes up. We've said that 18% is what we're seeing already. We think we can improve on that, but 18% is a really good start. And therefore income goes up from yield, but on top of that, we pay a premium. So that notion of really being serious about making interventions on sustainable living income is for me one of the most important things we can do when we think about human rights and human dignity and protecting communities. Due diligence is also important, though, and these are very complex supply chains. I know everyone who's on the call understands and appreciates just how many people are involved to get products produced. And we're really committed to being at the forefront of the best practice in due diligence and holding ourselves and the industry to those standards. And I think the more that we can make sure that due diligence is in place, that we're monitoring it, and anytime we see any infringement, we're the first to get involved, stop, intervene, and see how we can fix it. And I think that's the responsible way for all of us to tackle these issues.
Chris, if I may add, talking about the value you give to farmers, let's not forget the millions of new varieties and trees which we distribute to the farmers, coffee and cocoa varieties. The latest generation of Arabica varieties, they have a 50% higher yield at equal condition. And that's huge value for the farmers because they get much higher yield from their plantations than before. Then we have the drought and disease-resistant varieties. In some parts of the world, and people often forget that, 40% of the harvest, of the cocoa harvest, is destroyed by the cocoa shoot virus. So if you have more resistant varieties, first of all, you reduce the waste on the field, but it's also a huge benefit for the income of those farmers if you can protect 40% of your production. So let's not forget that.
We've probably got time for two more questions. The last one I'm going to ask you, just so you have time to think about it, is a great question from Guillaume Amado of LRQA, who says, what are the three most important challenges to achieve what we're talking about today? So we'll come to that in a moment. But first, a question for you, Stefan, which has come in, which is asking about, it's from Christine Karlmark from We Don't Have Time. And Christine is talking about how do we handle the risk from a heating climate on the crops of coffee and cocoa. Is there a risk that these crops will not have the time to adapt and that will no longer have the opportunity to use them?
Of course, we all know that there's a risk. And you see that already today. Today you see also in some parts of the world that harvest volumes are going down because of drought or because of severe weather conditions. You have both a bit, depending on which part of the world we are. Now, how can we help with that? Of course, we need to have, and I mentioned that just before, drought and disease-resistant varieties. So we're working very hard. Our scientists are working on classical breeding of drought-resistant coffee and cocoa varieties. And then the second axis is to work a bit on the irrigation technologies. There's still also something to gain. So we need to prepare for climate change. Climate change is a reality, it's progressing, and we need to ensure that we have the right varieties in the field, but also the right agricultural practices to ensure that these varieties can deliver what we need.
So let's finish off with Guillaume's question. So Antonia, let's start with you. What for you are the three most important challenges to achieve the 2030 public commitments that we've set out, bearing in mind it's it's only 5 years ahead?
Yeah, that many others join as well. It's of course, I mean, we're big, yeah, so we can already do quite a lot, but certainly to be fast and to progress as easy as possible, it's best if other companies, if other players are joined, if farmers adopt the practices quickly. Now, that's the first one, the speed of the adoption. Then the second one is to ensure that, we have one standard. You cannot go to a farmer, one company saying, so my understanding of Regenerative is this, another one has a slightly different one. So thankfully, we have already one standard there. I mean, the SCI platform has done a tremendous job. So that's great, but it will need to be developed further, and we need to immediately agree as an industry, as everybody who's involved, on one standard. So standard is the second one. So speed was the first one, standard is the second one. The third one is understanding quickly enough what's in it for the farmer. I mean, I'm always sticking with the agricultural part because this is the most relevant for us. Understand the motivation. So what makes the farmer successful?
Okay, David.
Thank you, Guillaume, for the question. 3 things from me. 1, we've got to be serious and we've got to be long-term. And by serious, I mean really facing into the fact that these are really complex and very long-term problems. And if we're going to solve them, we have to take long, hard, serious decisions over multiple decades, not just multiple years, to make the change that we want to see. So be serious and be long-term, and that's certainly our intent here. Second thing is control the controllables. I think especially at this time, there is a huge amount of disruption in the world from all sorts of macro factors. We have to stay really focused and control the controllables that we can. So all of the programs we've talked about, all of the interventions we have talked about are real, meaningful, achievable programs. They don't solve all of the problem, but they make a significant difference. So let's stay focused on doing what we can do and be very clear that a number of relatively small but significant interventions over time in multiple places will make a difference. And that brings me to the third point, which is echoing a little bit Antonia's. We need a level playing field. We are investing, we are leading, we're coming up with what we can see are solutions that make a difference. But we can only implement them at scale, and they will only stick and hold if we have a regulatory framework and we have an environmental framework that is consistent, long-term, and level. So we desperately need all of our stakeholders at government and non-governmental level to come together and agree this is the playing field, and from here we want to make the difference.
Stefan.
Well, for me, it's important that we don't look in isolation at the different dimensions of our value proposition. If there's something which we learned, if you focus only on nutrition, you will fail. You need to consider, besides nutrition, of course, the taste, because I mentioned that very nutritious product which is not tasting well, nobody will buy. Then the products have to be sustainable, and they have to be also affordable. So the affordability, the economics of solutions is very important. So first of all, to look at value propositions very holistically, and not fall into the trap that we optimize in one direction and we forget the rest. That will not work. Then the second thing is, like I said, economics. So even sustainability, I think if we want that sustainability is sustainable, it has to be economically viable. One or the other way. It has to make sense for our farmers. So to have it also farmer-centric is very important. If we cannot convince the farmers, well, we cannot bring it in the field. And then the last aspect, which came up also a couple of times, I think increasingly we need to localize also the sourcing. And that will be quite challenging. Because the reality is that the agricultural system is not yet developed in every part of the world. So that will require a lot of effort. So there's a lot to do, but that's why we are here.
So we're out of time, I'm afraid. That brings us to the end of today's session. A big thank you to you for joining us, and of course to all of our speakers here. We know that there were more questions than we had time to answer live. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them, but rest assured, the team will be following up with you and sending you responses after the webinar if your question went unanswered. Before you go, we'd love to hear your thoughts, so please take a moment to scan the QR code that you see on your screen and share your feedback or get in touch with us directly on the normal channels. Thank you again for joining this webinar, and we look forward to connecting with you soon.